So our question is, if Hashem needed to create free will, he just needed to set a stage where there are people, good people and bad people. Why did he have to create a world with so much life? So many animals, bugs, birds, fish, many of which, and this is the most interesting question of all, we may never even see. Before they had unmanned submersibles that went down into the deep depths of the ocean, we didn't know that many of those animals ever existed, nor would it have really made a difference to our lives. So we know that God doesn't do anything randomly. So why would he have created so many organisms that potentially we would have never seen? And they obviously have no effect on a person's free will, seemingly. So if the whole point of this world is to create a free will environment where there's good and evil and to choose good over evil, so why do you need this stage to be so elaborate and to have so many different details that seemingly make absolutely no difference to our lives? That's the big overarching question that we're going to try to answer tonight. But we have some sub-questions that hopefully everybody has thought about a little bit. And this year again is kind of panning out on life. Because very often when you're thrown into the video game, like we said, so you just take the pieces and the actors for granted. Because you're in the video game, so you just have to like move and do and avoid danger and try to grab the success that you can. That's what you do when you're in the video game. You're very reactive. So when you learn Torah, it's very nice that you reflect and you stop being reactive for a moment and you kind of pan out and you try to understand the why, not the how and the who and the what, but you try to understand the why. Why are things the way they are? So if you look here, question number 1. So like we were mentioning, and we're going to expand it a little bit, why did Hashem create so many different species of plants, animals, and minerals? Right? And we're answering, right, minerals and plants also. Why are there so many species of plants? Why do you need so many? Just, you want a tree to give shade, so make a tree. That's it. We just have one standard tree. And we have lots of them. You need a palm tree. How many types of palm trees are there? We live in Florida. Like 100 types of palm trees. What is the need for 100 types of palm trees? Seems excessive, if you ask me.
They're not native to Florida.
No. Okay, next question. What determines the unique properties of each species? Again, is this random? When you start learning a little bit about zoology, you'll realize how fascinating and unbelievable these species really are. And the processes that they go through to procreate and to eat or to generate food is mind-boggling. Unbelievable what science can show you about God's intricacies and the beauty of creation. And the question is, why? Make every plant operate in the same way. Animals should all eat the same food. To make it so complicated how each one operates and how they reproduce also seems excessive. Okay, last question, and this one is actually very, very important. Because when we learn Torah, very often you will notice that the Torah uses many, many metaphors and parables. Metaphors and parables. It's always talking in imagery, especially when you read Nevi'im, the prophets, and you read through, especially the Nevuahs that they actually see. It's very often weird animals and monsters and two-headed animals, and they're battling each other. And sometimes you just read through regular Tanakh, and it reads like poetry. And it's very beautiful that it reads like poetry, but we know that this is the divine word. And therefore, God is not just a poet for poetic value and to make it sound nice. That's not how God operates. Everything is exact. When you learn Gemara, you know that each word carries infinite significance. And the Torah, like we mentioned in the previous year, Kutshabricha v'Araisa Chad, that Hashem is one with the Torah. So it doesn't mean that Hashem is poetic. It means that there's something that the Torah is teaching you when it uses these metaphors and this language. Just like we learned last time, anthropomorphism, when Hashem uses human descriptions to describe himself. So that was a very deep lesson, that the human body is really telling you something about the true form, which is Hashem. And perhaps we're going to learn something about the Torah itself, that when it uses this metaphorical language, how are we supposed to unwrap the metaphor? And why does it do so? That's the question for tonight. Okay, so now we're going to jump in and we're going to take it source by source. Each of these sources could be a full shir on its own, so that's why I give you the sheets. I advise you to chazer and to use your own minds to connect ideas and to make inferences, but we're going to try to get the main nuggets and the kernel ideas out of each one, and we'll connect them together until we get an understanding that will enable us to hopefully answer these questions. Okay, so the first source, as always, we begin our journey in removing the mask with the Ramchal, because that's what the Ramchal was all about. Like we saw earlier, the Ramchal's whole mission in his Torah was to teach you that this world is a reflection of a higher world, and to help you remove the mask, to help you understand how you can get from this world to what's happening up there. So says the Ramchal, and this is from his Sefer Das Tvunos, which is a Sefer I highly recommend. It's a conversation between the neshama and the seichel. The Ramchal very often wrote his books as a conversation between two fictional characters. Here it's the neshama and the seichel. We said in Kinos Hashem Tzvakos, it's a conversation between the Kabbalist and the Litvak. There's another interesting sefer. So here the seichel is speaking. The seichel is explaining to the neshama how Hashem creates the world and how he operates within the world. So Amar HaSeichel, the seichel says, V'gam kol sha'ar brios ha'olam hem kach. On all the creatures of the world, they are like this. Kol achas ve'achas, dugma le'echad misisrei hanhagaso yizbarach. Each one is an example for some of the secrets of Hashem. No problem. So we said, every single creature in the world is really telling you a secret about Hashem's Hanhaga. So we have to translate this word Hanhaga because we're going to see it throughout the night, and it's a vague terminology. I got 4 English words to use to attempt to describe it. Okay, it's talking about Hashem. It's how Hashem conducts the world, how he operates within the world, how he manipulates the world, and how he directs the world. Those are all the words we're going to use. Okay, conducts, operates, manipulates, and directs. What does it mean to be manhig? To be manhig, a manhig is a leader. To be manhig is to lead. A hanhaga is how Hashem runs the world. Now, Hashem runs the world. We spoke about in the previous year that he's infinite. Right? He is so intense. Hashem is so intense, so infinite, that he's like the sun. If a person tries to step near the sun, what happens? He burns up, he disappears, he gets nullified in its presence. That's what happens when a person tries to approach Hashem. So in order for Hashem to create the world, but not only to create it, in order to operate within the world, because we don't believe that Hashem created the world and then kind of stuffed it under a pillow and left it to run on its own, he's here, he's operating within the world. So he had to create a mechanism that would enable him to operate and to conduct his affairs within the world. How does he do that? So yesterday we gave the word called Maisa Merkava. The Maisa Merkava are the 10 Spheros. Has everybody heard of the 10 Spheros? Familiar with the concept that there's 10 Spheros? Okay. 10 Spheros are 10 attributes of Hashem that he uses to conduct the world. We spoke about in previous Shurim. Chachma, Bina, Das are the intellectual Spheros. Then we have Chesed, which is kindness, Gvura, which is strength, Tiferes, which is beauty or harmony. We have Netzach, eternity, Hod, splendor, Yesod, which is the foundation, and then Malchus, kingship. That's the structure that really lines up with the human body. With those 10 Spheros, Hashem operates within the world. So what are the 10 Spheros? So these 10 attributes, Hashem can create a mixture or a recipe with the different pieces at any given time to operate within the world. So, for example, if Hashem wants to punish the world, if he wants to bring din, judgment, and destruction upon the world, so he will filter his light through this prism called Gvura, called strength. The Ramak, Moshe Cordovero, gives a very nice mashal for this. Maybe we'll use this mashal to try to understand it. He says that Hashem is like this super bright white light. You can't make an image on a screen with a white light. All it could do is shine. What do you need to create an image on a screen? So you need different colors. You need different colors, and if you have different colors and you shape them in the right way, so then if you shine the light through, you can actually create an image on the screen. So he says, imagine that Hashem is this infinite white light. However, he wants to run the world with almost human attributes. With Gvura, with Chesed, with kindness, he wants to punish. He wants to interact with us on our level because he created us in his image. So he invented these attributes. We think that there's something called kindness, right? Kindness, it makes sense. Kindness is when you're nice to people. Kindness is an invention. Hashem invented a concept called kindness. He invented, right? None of these things existed before Hashem created the world. These are concepts. Gvura, harmony, beauty, splendor, all these things, judgment, all these things are inventions that Hashem invented to interact with man. And He created us in His image. So we actually also have these attributes. So they make a lot of sense to us because we're also created through these spheros, through these different attributes of Hashem. So when Hashem wants to shine His white light into the world, but He actually wants to accomplish something and interact with us on our level through His attributes, He created these pane glass windows, imagine, right? You have 10 different colors. And at any given time, Hashem can kind of manipulate these colors into a certain pattern, and He'll project His light into the world to create that image. So let's say Gvura is red, right? Because it's din, it's judgment. So if Hashem wants to judge the world, that red pane glass will expand across this picture, this lens, and then when Hashem projects Himself into the world, so He's going to come through as din, as judgment. Because Hashem doesn't actually have judgment or kindness. Again, these are inventions. Hashem's infinite. He has everything and nothing because He's everything, so He's nothing. Right? If you have infinite, so there's no number that's within infinity. It's everything, so it's nothing. If you understand what that means, right? So He doesn't have Hashem's not really kind. He's infinite. He's everything. But He created this concept called kindness so that He can interact with us in a kind way, so that we can understand His ways and emulate them. We're supposed to be like Hashem. Okay, so He created this infrastructure, this mechanism. It's almost like a machine, like a spiritual machine, that He can use to interact with the world without nullifying it and blowing it away, because He's infinity. Good? So that's this concept called the Hanhaga of Hashem. The Hanhaga is these 10 Spheros, and it's the way in which Hashem interacts with the world. So with that introduction, watch this, how that works with all. So He says, from the beginning again, V'gam kol sha'ar brios ha'olam hem kach. Every single creature and physical element in the world is like this. Kol achas ve'achas dugma le'echad misisrei hanhagaso yizbarach. Every single one of them is actually an example of one of the secrets of Hashem's hanhaga, of these attributes of Hashem. And again, just to make a little more sense, each attribute is made up of its parts. So for example, everyone knows on Spheros HaOmer, you have a week that's chesed. You have a week that's gvura, right? There's 7 weeks that correspond to the 7 lower spheres. Chesed, gvura, tiferes, netzach, hod, yesod, malchus. 7 weeks, 7 attributes. Now, we have 49 days. We don't have, right? 49 days. So why do you need 49 if it's only 7? So each day, if you look in your siddur, when you say the Spheros HaOmer, has an attribute within an attribute. So the first day is chesed shebechesed. Then chesed shebegvura, then chesed shebetiferes, chesed shebenetzach, chesed shebehod, which means that every attribute, let's say chesed, which is 1/10 of the equation, it's actually made up of all 10 within it, so that you can take chesed and break it down into imagine chesed, and it has all 10 pieces within it. So within chesed, there's a gevura of chesed, there's a tiferes of chesed, there's a harmony, there's a beauty of chesed. Each one has its sum parts, which break down into infinity, because every one of those 10 has 10 within it, and within it. So there's chesed shebechesed shebechesed shebegvura, chesed shebechesed shebechesed shebetiferes. You can break it down just like you can with numbers, with mathematics. You can take any decimal and you can continue breaking it down, and every decimal point is made up of 10 parts, right? Because 0.1 is really 10 of 0.01s. 10.01s equals 0.1. 10.1s equals 1. Mathematics is the same way. So you can break everything down into its sum total of its parts, into the little pieces. So really, there's an infinite number of attributes of Hashem. There's 10, let's say, primary attributes. Just like you have colors. You can make an infinite shade of colors, but you have primary colors. So you have an infinite way that Hashem can express Himself in the world, because He can mix any of these attributes together, but there's 10 primary attributes. So every single physical object in this world, He's saying, is really an example or an illustration of one of these infinite attributes. The kivna hamachshav ha'alyona, lasos l'kol sidrei hanagoseh, dugma ba'olam hazeh. And Hashem was mechaven, He intentionally, this infinite wisdom of Hashem, intentionally placed His secrets into the entire order of creation, so that every single creature and plant and mineral in the world is really reflecting a different hanhaga, a different attribute of Hashem. Umikan nimshach rov hamon habrios, and from there is drawn out the millions and millions of creatures that we see in the world and creations. Shekol bria ubria mare Al echad misidre hanagasa yizbarach, that each one is actually showing you and illustrating for you and manifesting one of the attributes of the infinite attributes of Hashem. V'nidunim kol mikri habriya hahi, and listen to this. This is amazing. And all of the mikrim, all of the happenings, all of the biological processes, of the reproductive processes, of the attributes of each creature, b'chol tzuroseh u'sguloseh, in all of its forms and its unique properties, al pi inyanei haseder ahu ha'omed liroz bo, is being run according to that attribute. So if you study the creature, it's not just the way it looks, it's actually the way that it acts. Even the way that it acts is reflecting something about Hashem. So you take like a sponge in the ocean. It has spores and you could break off a piece and it can recreate itself from the piece that was broken off. That's teaching you something about Hashem. There's an attribute of Hashem that's called a sponge. Okay, in the higher world, it looks very different than a sponge. But when it comes down into this world, it becomes a sponge. Right? A beetle, a mosquito, everything. Everything in the world is really a crystallization of an attribute of Hashem. And the thing itself and all of its processes are actually reflecting that attribute of Hashem. Until all of the midos of Hashem that we just spoke about are like the roots of creation. And all of the creatures in creation are actually branches that are coming off of these roots. That the attributes of the creations in this world are actually dependent on the reality of the midos that exist in the higher worlds. And from there, we can understand what the Nevi'im were seeing. This teaches you why the Nevi'im always saw their visions in very trippy dreams. Very trippy dreams. Very, very strange things were happening. Because what's Hashem trying to show a Navi? He's showing him what's coming. Right? He's giving him a glimpse of what's coming. The coming attractions. So Hashem wants to show a Navi coming attractions. So how's he going to tell him? Well, if you just use words, it's very limited. Just like a painting can say a lot more than a sentence, usually. Right? You can express a lot more in a painting. So Hashem's infinite expression, Hashem is expressing emotions, so to speak. His emotions. Again, we're using borrowed terminology, he doesn't have emotions. But his emotions, his hanhagas, right, the way that he's going to conduct himself in the world, it's very multidimensional. It's not like a sentence. So Hashem is going to express it in a metaphorical image. Not a random metaphorical image like a parable, but every single aspect of that image that he's showing you is telling you another tiny detail and nuance in the message that he's delivering. He shows in the lion and the ox, and everything else that they see in the nevuos, and that's obvious. Okay? So what the Navi is really seeing, right, the Navi is not seeing the physical thing. He's seeing the root of the thing itself. He's seeing the root of the thing itself, which is why the projector mashal is so apropos. Because just we'll do the next. Maybe we'll skip a source. We'll do one more source, and then we'll get into the projector mashal to understand how exact the details of that mashal really are, of how a projector works and how Hashem is projecting Himself into reality through a lens that we call the Torah. Right? We're going to understand that the Torah is really the lens. So okay, let's skip the next source for a moment, and we'll go back to it. It's more of an application of this idea, and we're going to apply this idea in a real way. But we'll go to the next Ramchal. This is in Klach Pischei Chachma, which is a Kabbalistic sefer that he's really giving an introduction to Kabbalah over there. But this is a very interesting excerpt that we're taking. He says, Ach, yesh mitzius achas sheratza haratzon ha'elyon shehanhaga milvad ma shetia be'emes betachtonim sharehem ha'nehugim gam tir'eh bam. So Hashem wanted that the reality of what exists in the higher worlds should not only be expressed in the lower worlds, but it should actually be visible in them. That in the lower world, you should be able to discover the details and the aspects of Hashem. Pirush, what does that mean? That the creatures themselves will teach you about Hashem. And there'll be so many creatures, like we said, according to the amount of attributes of Hashem, that each koach has its own creature that represents it. Like we said before. Fine. By the way, this is my opinion why perhaps, how many animals are there in the world? How many living organisms are there?
Very many.
How many species of living organisms are there?
We don't even know.
What? So right, I don't know. Someone might say 6. Fair guess. Someone 42. Someone might say a billion, a gazillion, a bajillion, whatever number. I think that the answer is there's infinite number of animals, and they'll never stop discovering them. I bet you they'll never ever stop discovering animals. I'll bet you.
They're always discovering something else.
Yeah, exactly. I'll bet. So people are saying because we haven't discovered them yet, because we haven't.
Being recombined and changed, and especially new.
There's infinite. There's an infinite number. Yeah, there's an infinite number. There's an infinite number. There's an infinite number of attributes and combinations of Hashem's Hanhaga. So guess what? There's an infinite number of creatures in creation. It's still filmed, still. So I will tell you that it's my call right now. I don't care how many more. I mean, look, the world's only going to last for another, what is it, 219 years? 218 years, sorry. 218 years, max?
Better start packing.
Max. No. Till the year 6000, right? 6000 is the end. That's when we're going to...
2000 was supposed to end.
That's what they said. Don't trust them. That's second. 6,000 is the end. Right? Rav Berkovitz from the Rosh Yeshiva of Eish Torah, he does Eish Torah as a Kiruv Yeshiva. So very often he'd have very liberal-minded individuals come into yeshiva and start learning for the first time, and he wanted to be very accepting for their ideals. So he always asked them, like according to science, because he never studied climate change and all these things, how many years do we have left? So in the beginning they said the world will be underwater in 300 years. So he said, okay, that's fine. We don't need 300 years. There's 218 years left. And then recently someone told him, no, it's like 168 years or something ridiculous. And he said, oh, that's a problem. That's a problem.
My problem.
Yeah, that's somebody's problem. So if that's it, it's somebody's problem. But as long as you get to 6,000, we're good to go.
What about those animals and plants and so forth that are extinct?
Excellent. When we get to the application, that's a beautiful point. We'll get to the application. But that's very right. Up until this year, he said an animal is extinct. Who cares? Big deal. It just means he was overhunted.
Is it a death of a part of Hashem?
I don't know if it's a death, but we have to understand what it means. But there's something unbelievably significant happens when an animal goes extinct.
Many were destroyed in the Mabul.
We'll see why. And many were destroyed in the Mabul, right? There's an animal goes extinct. It's not because of people overhunted it. Hashem made this animal delicious, or it had great fur, or whatever reason, we killed all of them. But for whatever reason that was, Hashem wanted to remove that element of his attribute from the world. But you're right, you have to understand why. And we're not going to be able to really give a real answer for any animal. But what do you mean?
There's a limit to everything.
What thing?
What you just said. It can extinct. There's an end to everything.
There's an end to everything that dies, but to a species is interesting. An end to everything that lives, but an end to a species doesn't happen until the end game, until 6,000. Right? Then things will shift into a new reality. But until then, they should exist. Okay. So now look what he says in the non-bold. I should have bolded the non-bold, really, because the bold is really what we already learned. Okay. Hashem needs a converter. He needs a converter, right? You need Google Translate. He has to take spiritual concepts and translate them into physical things. Right? That's what Hashem's doing. So he needs a converter. Pirush. He needs something that's going to guide the rules of the Hanhaga, all the attributes of Hashem, so that they're going to be seen and converted into creatures. Pirush. Who's something that's going to cause a certain koach, look at his examples just so you see how broad it is. A certain koach to be seen in the ear, in the ozen. A certain koach, we learned in the last year, right? The ear, if you study all the intricacies of the ear, it's expressing an aspect of the soul, which is really expressing an aspect of Hashem. So something's going to convert the spiritual concept called ear, and we know there is one because Hashem uses anthropomorphism, so we see that Hashem is even describing himself as hearing, so that's a very deep concept. There's a spiritual concept called an ear. What's going to convert that concept into an ear? The koach echad bepeh, and another koach into the mouth, it's amazing. Like, what's a mouth? It's unbelievable. Right? You have teeth, you have a tongue, it speaks, it breathes, it eats. All of that is a mashal. Right? All of that is a parable, is a metaphor that's going to teach you something about the mouth. The mouth is obviously a very potent spiritual force if it's capable of doing all of that. The koach echad betapuach, and another koach is going to be in an apple. Why does an apple look the way it does? Why does it have seeds the way that it does? Right? Why does a strawberry have seeds on the outside and some have seeds on the inside? Some have a peel, some don't have a peel. If you wrap my Tu B'Shvat Seder, so there's Kabbalistic inyanim about different fruits, why they have peels and why they don't, and why the seed is on the inside, why some are fully edible, why some seeds are edible, some are not. The koach echad b'mayim, and another koach will manifest itself as water. The koach echad b'kesef, and another one will become silver. V'adai tzarech sheyeh orish sheskulas olezeh. There must be some light, some spiritual concept that its capability is to convert spirituality into these things. Lahavir hanhaga el tzir b'derech hazeh. To convert the hanhaga of Hashem into these different things. V'hine kol zehu b'malchus. Okay, now we're going to get just the Kabbalistic terminology down. This is all called malchus. Now, in Kabbalistic terminology, malchus we said is the last of the spheros, right? Chachma, bina, das, chesed, gvura, tiferes, netzach, hod, yisod, malchus. Malchus on the bottom. Malchus is called leis de megar me klum. In Kabbalah, it says it doesn't have anything of its own. It doesn't have its own attribute. It's really a holding tank for all the others. Everything flows down into Malchus. Malchus is on the bottom. A true king is like David HaMelech. David HaMelech was completely empty of himself. He was an expression of Hashem. Hashem's rulership in the world is expressed through the Jewish king. He is a composite of the entire nation of the Jewish people. And his soul represents that. And that's what a king, leis de megar me klum. He has nothing of his own. That's this concept called Malchus. The Kabbalistic Sfarim say Malchus bepeh. Malchus is the mouth. What does your mouth do? So watch this. Human beings need a converter as well. Sometimes you need to convert Spanish into English. Sometimes you need to convert thoughts into words. You need to. That's what you do all day, by the way, if you haven't noticed. Not only, sometimes you speak the words, sometimes you don't. But you always are converting thought into words, unless you meditate. If you're someone who meditates, so then you actually think as thinking is. You think in thought, you don't think in words. But most of us think in words. You have a thought, and we're so disconnected with that part of ourselves, unless the person meditates, that they don't really attach themselves or relate to the thought. They relate to the words. So what do? We convert our thoughts into words. That's what you think. When you think all day, you're really thinking in a monologue. Right? You're just talking to yourself all day in your head. Sometimes you speak it out, but what you're doing is you're converting thoughts into words. You're packaging them and limiting them. When you listen to music, right, you're not. There's no words going through your head. Your mind, and if you look at CAT scans, your mind is operating in different areas. That you're thinking in a different way. Your mind is alive, but it's alive in a different way. When you have words, it has to go into a specific area where you're limiting your mind into packaged words. Then when you want to communicate, if you ever want to express your thoughts to another person, so until you're very, very close to that person and you can use body language, so you're really expressing almost completely in words. You meet a stranger, you have to talk to them, you express it in words or sign language, but that's also just words with your body, but expressing it in words. So really your mouth is a converter. It's a translator. It translates ideas into words. And look how it works. It's very interesting. When you want to send a file to somebody and it's too large, so what do you have to do? You have to compress it, and then you send it, and then you try to open the zip file and it doesn't work, and you can't figure it out. You Google how to unzip it. Right? Put it on Google Drive. So you zip the file. I don't know what happens, but evidently it zips it somehow, and then it goes to your computer, and then you unzip it, and the file expands again. Okay. So that's really what happens when you talk to somebody. Because what do you really want to tell them? You want to tell them your idea, your thought. Right? If you could, you would just telepathically just have the conversation with them like that. You wouldn't really want to convert it into words because things can be lost in translation. Some people are not very articulate. They can't even express themselves in words very well. Some people can't even talk. A person can be mute, can't even speak in words. So ideally you'd like to transfer an idea, but an idea is infinite, or at least much more infinite than words. It can expand, it can change, it can express emotions. You can't really express emotions in words very easily. So an idea is much more infinite. But you can't express an idea. So what do? You have to zip the file. So you zip the file by taking your idea and you turn it into words. And 1 minute, you finish the muscle, and then you take that zipped file and you express it in words, and what happens? It goes into the guy's ear, and it goes into his brain, and then he unzips it. Now you hope he unzips it accurately and loyally, and he understands what you're trying to convey. Or he could totally misunderstand you and say, I didn't say that, I didn't mean that. Well, how am I supposed to know what you mean? You're just very inarticulate. So, well, because he's not good at Malchus. He's not good at Malchus. Now, what's interesting, question first?
I was just going to say, I'm really trying to learn how to read my wife's mind. And
Just give up. Give up, it's impossible.
But I kid you not, every time she says take out the leg quarters, I somehow take out just the legs. I don't know. So I'm trying.
So we'll learn how to listen as well. There's listening and there's speaking.
You have the wrong converter.
You have to convert as well. Yeah. So many people think that if a child is late in speaking, it's a bad thing. Who says it's a bad thing? You know what? I read the biography of Albert Einstein. You know he couldn't speak until he was like 3 years old or something? He couldn't even say a word until he was 3 years old.
It must have been done.
What has been done? He's been a dumb kid. Right? Failed math. Have you ever read this biography about Albert Einstein, about how he came up with his theories? It's unbelievable. His mind worked in such a creative way. He found out that light was actually particles and not waves, all these unbelievable ideas that no one even, it was so imaginative. And he was right, which is unbelievable that he was right, which is crazy because he didn't even they tested the ideas only later when the science caught up to the theory, and he was right. But what an imaginative mind. You know what? It could be because he didn't speak until he was 4 years old. His mind, who do we know in Torah that couldn't speak? What an idiot. Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest human being that ever lived, couldn't speak. Kavod lashon v'kavod peh. Right? Arel sfasayim. So there's like 4 different ways to describe how Moshe couldn't speak. Maybe that was his Maila, like the Maharal says, which we won't get into the whole thing now, but the Maharal says that was the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu, that he couldn't speak. And this is really the idea of Sod, of what we're learning. And I think everyone is experiencing it, hopefully, tonight and throughout the Shurim. Sod, when you learn the secrets of Torah, it's not a secret because he knows and he didn't want to tell you. Like the rabbi, he knows, and he's just not going to tell me because he likes to keep it a secret. Because I can't handle secrets. That's not why it's a secret. It's a secret because it can't be spoken. It cannot be spoken. It's a concept that only exists where words end. So how do you speak it? So you do your best to fumble around. Rabbi Akiva Tatz gives a good mashal. He always says, when he starts to shir, he's like, we're gonna kind of fumble around a hole and hopefully we fall in. That's what these shurim, a lot of these shurim are like. When you learn the Ramchal, that's what it's like. The Ramchal will tell you a concept, and you'll think you understand it. And he'll say, what I'm saying here, like we read last time, the last line said, what I'm saying here is much deeper than you can ever imagine, and Hamevin Yavin. And the more you think about it, the more layers you'll understand. Because the concept they're speaking about is infinite. It has infinite applications. All these series of shurim are really one concept. And we're just unpacking them in many different ways. And the idea is that you can actually grasp the sod, the secret of the thing itself, which is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is kind of like bumpers on a bowling alley. Right? What?
You gotta unzip it.
You gotta unzip it, right? You gotta unzip it yourself, which you have the words and unzip it. But I don't necessarily have the file in my head either, but we're doing our best. It's in here somewhere. You have the bumpers, and the way that you teach sod has to be with a Rebbe. You can't access Sodei HaTorah without a Rebbe, or a Sefer, and hopefully a Rebbe guiding you through a Sefer. Kabbalah was always the most intact chain of Rebbe to Talmud, because you couldn't transmit it any other way. You couldn't get there any other way. Sometimes the Rebbe happened to be Eliyahu Hanavi, and he came down into the world and taught the Arizal, and he taught the Ramchal. It could be spirits from the other world that can transfer Torah to the person himself. But that's how these ideas operate.
It's not just realization, it's someone actively teaching.
Yeah, it's someone actually actively teaching. And they teach in the sod. If you learn from a neshama, you don't have to learn in words. He can transmit information in a different way. Our next series, Bezrat Hashem, is going to be in understanding what happens when a soul leaves this world. Is life after death. And the greatest case study to understand what that is a phenomenon called near-death experiences, where people have actually died, thousands upon thousands of people, especially with modern resuscitation methods and CPR. So more people are dead and alive than ever before in history. That's for sure. So you have thousands and thousands of people that died and came back. And there are books. And I highly recommend you get them. But if you want to wait till the shir, I have all these books and they're marked off, and we're going to learn through excerpts from them and compare them to Torah sources. But there's books that describe what these people experience when they're dead in the other world. And one of the most amazing phenomenon that is found across the board in many, many cases. Remember, cross cultures, cross religions. I'm not talking about like one individual they interviewed. I'm talking about thousands. That describe that when they're in that world, they communicate but without words. And they're like, I can't describe it, but it's almost like I was telepathically transmitting my ideas into the other person's head. That's the lashon they use, which is so beautiful when you learn this Torah that it makes so much sense. That's exactly what happens when you leave this world. If you don't have a body anymore, so you're not limited by this requirement called malchus, which we're going to understand. This world is malchus. That's the lowest rung on the chain. All the spiritual worlds filter into malchus, which is in this world. Leis de magar meklum. It's like a holding tank for all of the attributes of Hashem. And when it gets to this world, it manifests itself as physical reality. But in the spiritual world, so you don't need words. You can just communicate, like just tell me. So you just do it. You can just tell me. In that world, they say that when they experience an angel, or some say when they experience God, whatever they encountered, they were like downloaded with infinite amounts of wisdom in a moment. And when they got back to this world, it's so amazing, the lashon they use, because we'll read it, it's English. People aren't even Jewish, half of them. So they say, I remember everything that I was taught, but it would take me 1,000 years to unpack it. I can't even unpack like a tiny, like a grain of sand from like the desert. But it's all there. He's like, the person says, I know it's there, but I can't unpack it. Because he came back into this world. It's like when, right? Just to take it to the Maral, what he says, when a baby is in the mother's womb, so what does he do all day? He just punches a little bit, moves around, and makes things uncomfortable. And he learns Torah. He learns Torah all day, right? The baby learns Torah all day. And when he's born, so he gets a makeh bepeh, and he forgets everything. So what we learned tonight, it's very beautiful. Where does he get his makeh? On his peh. So the Maral says he gets the rudiments of Dibur. He gets the koch of Dibur actually took away his Torah. Because who are you learning from in the womb? You're learning from an angel. So it's almost like a near-death experience, or a pre-death experience, or a pre-birth experience. Right? A pre-birth experience. A near-birth experience. A near-birth experience where this child is learning spiritual Torah. He's learning the Torah as it exists in that world. Because remember, the Torah also trickles down through all the world. So there's many levels. When you learn about, read about the Kabbalistic Sfarim, there's Yeshiva Shalmala. There are different heichalos. There's different rooms up there with different magidei shir. To get into Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's, you have to be Tocho Keboro. There's all these requirements. Rabbi Shubin Levi, the Gemara says, tried to go in and he couldn't get in. Right? He has a special yeshiva up there. Imagine the Torah they're learning up there. Right? It's not limited by Dibur, not limited by anything. It's just going deeper and deeper. And it's Hashem, right? The Kutchabrichu, the Torah Kulachad. Hashem's one with the Torah, so you can go infinitely deep. It never ends. Olam Haba is going to be the Torah that you experience in this world taken to many, many different levels. Many different levels in an infinite way, and you'll experience it in a very different way when you're in a Shama. But that's what happens when the baby's in the womb. When he comes out and he gets this rudiments of speech, so then he forgets everything. He forgets everything because he just went into the world of Dibur. And it's exactly like the guy's near-death experience. It's so beautiful because it's on the opposite ends. Like I said, a near-birth experience and a near-death experience. Both of them, right? Imagine these are like the borders, like life and death. Both of them crossed over just on what's on the other side. The same exact thing as what's on the other side of this one. They're both the same other side. There's just a little part in the middle called your life. But whenever you're on the other side, you experience the same thing. You can experience the Torah as it exists in the spiritual world. In the Zohar, there's this very interesting character called the Yenuka. Has anyone heard of the Yenuka? There's a guy called the Yenuka now. I'll tell you about him in a minute. But a Yenuka was a baby, or it was a very, very young child, 3 or 4 years old, that knew the whole Torah. More than the Torah. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his Talmidim, now read through the Zohar about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He was learning with Eliyahu and Avi, he was all day. Unbelievable. He and his Talmidim, the Chaverim they were called, they would go learn from the Yenuka. They would go ask the Yenuka questions, this baby. So who's this Yenuka? So it was a child that remembered all the Torah that he learned in the womb. And he remembered all the Torah from his previous Gilgulim. He knew all the Torah. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai would go ask him questions. And they died at a very young age. And this phenomenon, Google it, existed, I think it was 50 or 60 years ago. I forget which Sephardi Rav, I believe it was, Mordechai Eliyahu, I believe it was taken to this child that was like 3 years old and knew the entire Torah at 3 years old. And he gave him a bracha that he should forget it, and the baby forgot it. But it's a story documented. Go look it up. Crazy. You heard of it? Strange bracha. He said that the baby couldn't live a normal life and they die young because they don't have a purpose in this world. The reason you come into this world is to recreate the Torah that was taught to you in the womb. The Zohar says that the same angel that taught you Torah in the womb is the very same angel that's going to greet you when you die. And he's going to ask you those questions, Kavati Timot Torah, Tzipiti Yeshua. He's going to ask you those questions. And what's he really trying to determine? Did you actualize the Torah that I gave you as a seed? What do you learn in the womb? You don't just learn standard Torah. You learn your Torah. You're getting ready to come into the world. You learn your Torah, the Torah of your life. Now, the Torah is not just necessarily the information that you learn, it's you, because the Torah is much deeper than a person, it's much deeper than a concept, like we're saying, it's one with Hashem. So he teaches you your Torah. At the end of your life, he comes and he gives you a test. Did you bring out your Torah? Not only did you learn your Torah, which is a big, big part of it, did you live your Torah? Did you become your Torah, who you are supposed to be? Because every person has an neshama that's rooted in the Torah. It has its own unique attributes, like where this whole shir is speaking about. It's not just plants and animals, it's people. Right? It's you and I. Each of us is also an expression of a beautiful mosaic of Hashem's attributes in our own unique neshama. And we're just projecting that into the world. Hopefully, if you learn Torah and you try to work on yourself, and you try to go halachta b'dracha, you try to become like Hashem, so then you project your Torah into the world, you project your neshama into the world loyally in the good way, right? Your yetzer tov. If not, guess what? There's something else that was introduced into your neshama after Adam Rishon sin. It's called the Yetzer Hara. That's not you. The Yetzer Hara is not you. The Yetzer Hara is going to be shechted at the end of days. He's not even eternal. He's just this little guy that's kind of like, walking around trying to trick you, right? Trying to trick you here and there. The Gemara says, the Midrash says, he's like this guy in the shuk, and it's such a beautiful Midrash. It's this guy in the shuk that says, you guys will not believe what's in my hand. And everyone's like, what's in his hand? He said, I can't tell you. So suddenly, like, a few people start saying, what's in his hand? No, really, what's in the hand? He says, you want to see the hand? You have to catch me. And he starts running. So everybody starts chasing this guy to see what's in the hand. And another person says to, like, his friend, what's in his hand? He's like, I don't know, but it must be amazing because everybody's chasing it. So they all start chasing him. Suddenly there's a crowd of people that's chasing it. Everybody walks out of the house and they just see like hundreds of people running. And the guy's like, quick, you won't believe it. And everyone just starts running. And no one even thinks twice. Everybody starts running. Right? And then finally they corner him and everyone's exhausted and just wasted their whole day. And he says, okay, you want to see what's in the hand? Nothing. Gotcha. Okay.
Do it again the next day.
So that is what the Yetzer Hara does in this world. It's a very sad mashal because if you don't stop and learn Torah, which is really thinking about what the world is really about, so you can spend your whole life just chasing what everybody else is chasing. And trust me, what the masses are chasing is 100% not the answer. It's not anything. There's nothing in that hand. And when you get to the next world, it's going to be really, really sad. Because when you finally catch that guy, and he opens up his hand, and you see what you're left with, there's going to be nothing there. Because we said, when you get into that world, which is only reality, and we'll see this in the near-death experience shiurim, when these people get to that world, they just describe how you see what's real and what's not. Immediately. Immediate perception. Gehenna, hell, is the experience of the regret and the shame a person feels for spending his life chasing what's fake. When he could have been scooping up diamonds, which are called mitzvahs. He could have been scooping up diamonds. Diamonds that last eternity. Diamonds are forever. He could have been scooping up diamonds, and he spent his whole day like collecting dirt. Worse than dirt, because it's not even you're not even gonna have dirt. I mean nothing. That's what a person spends their whole life can follow. So a person's neshama is his reality. That's what he can become up in that world. He can become his neshama in that world, right? That's what he should be. To the extent to which he actualizes his neshama in this world is the extent to which he will exist in his true form that who he really is in that world. So it can either be a very proud experience, if you get to the yeshiva shomala and you have the Torah in your hand and you have the mitzvahs in your hand and the chesed in your hand and the tzedakah in your hand, or it can be very, very embarrassing and very sad and you might have to even come back down. Unfortunately, that's what can happen to a person when he gets up there. So when you get to near-death experiences, it becomes very real because these people were there. Some of them even went through the whole din b'cheshbon. They went through the whole judgment. Some of the Jews went through everything. And these guys weren't religious. They literally never learned any of this. and they come back and describe in detail what it says is going to happen in the Graz Sefer Even Shlema when a person dies. They went to a rabbi and said, "Does this make any sense?" And the rabbis were like, "Oh, like that's," and they show him the Sefer. Yeah, they show him the Sefer like it's word for word what it says here. And it's unbelievable to take the Torah and make it as real as it can be.
You know, a lot of going and say, "Oh, you walk towards the light. There was a light."
Yeah, we're going to go into it.
And then he saw Jesus over there, and then he saw. You know,
we'll see what they saw.
Whatever is in his head.
Most of them,
you know,
we'll see. We're
say,
going to go through a study of thousands of people.
Jesus,
You're going to see thousands of people, and we're going to see the commonalities of the experience. There's a documentary. If you want to do your homework, you can go on YouTube and type in the commonalities of the experience, near-death experiences. The guy interviewed about 6,000 people, and he cuts the clips back to back so you can see each person who never met each other talking about the same exact thing in the same words that they can't describe in words. They use the same words that I can't really describe, and they're all fumbling in the same way to describe something that can't be described in words. Because words are this concept called malchus that converts these spiritual concepts into physical ideas, physical creatures. Okay, and I think we might have to call it, except we'll do one last piece of Likutei Moharan, and then we're going to actually continue on this same topic next time, because we didn't finish it all, and I don't want to get to the next one. But this is just one very interesting application that will give you another idea of how you can kind of morph this into many different ideas of how the world operates. So when I learned this, and I was mechav into this, mechav means I understood this on my own, and then I saw it in the Likutei Moharan, and I added it to the source sheet. This was not on the source sheet when I first gave this shir. How does medicine work, doctor?
According to Breslov,
You
can eat any.
Oh.
You can eat anything you want, and as long as you have faith that Hashem is going to heal you, that will
No. Doctor, come on. Don't go to this doctor, guys. So how does medicine work? So the Rabbi Nachman. So when I thought of these concepts, I said, wow. So that means when you take different physical objects in this world and you combine them, what are you really combining?
Attributes and aspects of
Yeah, you're combining attributes of Hashem. You're combining spiritual concepts. You're combining spiritual attributes. So I said, wow, how does medicine work? So you're taking all these different elements and minerals and compounds and whatever you're doing, and you're combining them, and they heal a person. So if you're very physical, so you say that's just how the body works. But if you understand that there's a soul that also gets sick when the body gets sick, and there's a way to fix it with tshuva and maisim tovim, but there's also called a sefer harafuos that Chizkiyahu hid away. Chizkiyahu had a book. There was a book that was passed down from Avraham Avinu that could tell you how to heal anything. How to take any mixture of plants and herbs or whatever it was in the world, and you could heal anything. And people stopped having emunah in Hashem because they said, what do we need it for? So he hid the book, which is crazy. Because millions and millions and millions of people were going to die because you don't have the refuah anymore. But he hid the book because he said that it wasn't worth it. It was destroying people's lives, or destroying people's olam haba, their eternal lives. So he hid the book. So what's that book? That book is really just explaining all the different spiritual compounds and how they're converted into physical objects and which ones you have to combine to fix your spiritual malady.
There's locks to keys.
Right. That's what medicine is. That's what Rabbi Nachman says. Rabbi Nachman says that's how medicine works. Medicine is combining spiritual forces that will actually heal your body, because really they're the same forces that will heal your neshama in the spiritual world. That's how medicine works. So everything in this world, yeah?
Spiritual organic chemistry?
Yes. Yes, you can start a course, make it harder than regular organic chemistry. But this is how the whole world works. And just one food for thought that we're not going to get into, but you can think of it yourself. This is how mitzvahs work. This is how mitzvahs work. You ever wonder why you have a lulav and an esrog and a hadassim and a ravos? And does it really matter if it's doesn't have a dot on it? And does it really matter if the leaf is split or if it's not the right color? Why do people blow so much money on an esrog? Well, learn this could make a very big difference. Up there, right? Down here it's just a lemon. Right? But up there, that little dot can passel your esrog. You know what that means up there? Up there, it means it doesn't do anything. Doesn't do anything.
It's
not even esrog.
Incorrect code.
Yeah, It means up there, it's not an esrog. It's not an esrog. It's a passel esrog. It doesn't do anything. You could shake it all day. Nothing's gonna happen. Nothing's gonna happen. You might get tired. Nothing's gonna happen. So when it comes to mitzvahs, this is just another flavor of this whole idea. Is mitzvahs matter. Little things matter. Details matter. Tzitzis have to be tied in the right way. Your tefillin have to be black. They have to be square. The parchment has to be written properly. It has to be done lishma, right? You have to actually make the parchment lishma, or it's possible, right? You have to write Hashem's name with kavana lishma, or the Sefer Torah is not kosher, right? Unbelievable. That's it. That's cool. Think about that. That's the interplay between your neshama and the ink and the writing. You can actually take your thought and give kedusha to the shame of Hashem. If you don't do that, it's nothing. It's like a monkey wrote it. It doesn't have any kedusha. It's not a kosher Sefer Torah. Like, wild. So, food for thought. But hopefully this enriches your idea of this world, and we'll continue next time to try to understand a little bit more about the animal kingdom in particular. Yeah, no, it's still recording.